Hello, everybody. Before we get into this edition of the Global Game, I do wish to address some very sad news. Obviously, we put the episode you're about to see together sometime in advance, but in the days since then, we suffered a great loss in fandom, as we have lost another legend. Martindale, who I don't think anybody would argue you could probably put him on the Mount Rushmore of game show hosts. He has recently passed away at the age of 91. Amongst Wink's contributions to broadcasting over his more than 70-year career, hosting 20 nationally televised game shows, with his biggest hit being Tic-Tac-Toe, which incidentally was just recently revived on GSN. He also produced Bumper Stumpers and Second Honeymoon here in Canada, and he had a very extensive career in radio, where I can't even begin to talk about the influence he's had on that industry. Maybe the biggest accomplishment being conducting some of the earliest known recorded interviews with the legendary Elvis Presley, with whom he was a friend for many years. So he, in a way, helped introduce him to the world. And to the fandom, he's also earned a great deal of praise, serving as the namesake of a YouTube channel which has released numerous rare clips and episodes in recent years. In particular, it's shown a lot of unsold pilots that many of us thought we would never see. And of course, I think there can be no greater accomplishment than being a devoted family man, because in addition to his legacy, Wink is survived by his wife Sandy, to whom he had been married for nearly 50 years, as well as 4 children from a previous marriage. Our condolences at this time go out to them, his friends, family, and colleagues. Thank you for everything you did for us, Mr. Martindale. You will be missed. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Global Game. I'm your host, Marc Power. I read the complaints. We were saying the volume wasn't high enough, so we're trying some things here today. I apologize. Hope this is sounding a lot better. My voice, I know, it's very quiet. I'm trying, and I'm trying not to strain myself too bad, but I'm trying to make it a little more clear for you guys to hear me better. So hopefully this goes better. If not, I'm sure you'll let me know if it's still way too low. But anyway, on this edition of the show, we're going to go back to England. And we're going to talk about a game show that kind of has a bit of an unfortunate place in history. Being the first truly big money game show in England. And it just didn't work out. There's a cardinal rule in any game show, and it seems to be a universal fact any country you go to, that you don't need to have a huge prize in order to make a good show. In the same respect, you can have a huge prize on the line, but if the game is no good, then you're just wasting your money. England is arguably the most famous country when it comes to having a bevy of good game show formats, but they were severely handcuffed by low budgets. And this was mainly because, for a long time, the Independent Broadcasting Authority had very strict prize limits on all the shows. Now, yes, in America, there was that too, where for many years the networks would set winnings limits. But they were usually pretty reasonable amounts. And there were exceptions that can be made at times, like for special circumstances, if they were in a Tournament of Champions or something like that. And most times you could actually go over the limit, but once you got there, you had to stop. or they would make you donate the access to a charity of your choice. But yeah, they were pretty reasonable working around it for the most part. And there was that infamous case with the syndicated The Joker's Wild, where the contestant went over the limit, and the producers argued and argued with the network to get them to raise the limit, and eventually they hit a compromise, and he got to keep most of his winnings. But in the UK, there was just no getting around it, and it was not uncommon for the prizes that were on the line to be worth maybe no more than a couple £100. They were just very, very handcuffed. But luckily, things started to change in 1993 when those rules changed and the limits were dropped. So prize money started going up on a lot of shows. And there were many producers out there who were getting ready to whip out the checkbook and proclaim mine is bigger than yours when it comes to their budgets. So in 1995, we got a show built around giving away, at the time, Britain's biggest prize ever on a game show. A fully furnished house. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is Raise the Roof.
Welcome to Raise the Roof, the show that opens the door to television's biggest ever prize. Playing tonight for the Kings from County Durham, teacher Peter King. With her friends from Manchester, bank clerk Joan Bracegirdle. For the Broadbents from Henley-on-Thames, training consultant Jen Broadbent. With her friends from Basingstoke, secretary Hayley May. For the Stubbs from Leeds, printer John Stubbs. And with her family from Leeds, radiographer Susan Pickles. And you're playing for the ultimate prize, this townhouse in Spain. And here's the man with the key to the door, Bob Holness.
Thank you very much and welcome to Raise the Roof. Tonight, one of our players will get the chance to play for the keys to a home in the sunshine. And these are the keys. And this is the home where the sun could rise on their brand new life.
Tonight's home is this townhouse in sunny Spain, in a development of 4 acres of landscaped tropical gardens and neat tree-lined streets bounded by white walls. From the balconies, there are panoramic views over the entire complex and beyond. There are beautiful marble floors throughout the cool and spacious living areas. The large bedrooms have terraces from which to survey this popular holiday location. Just 5 minutes from the beach. And it's on offer tonight on Raise the Roof.
And the value of tonight's home is a fantastic £92,358.
Raise the Roof debuted on Yorkshire Television in September of 1995 and ran until January of 1996, so only a few months. It was produced by Action Time Productions and hosted by radio DJ and popular TV host Bob Holness. Bob Holness had hosted several shows over his career, but was best known as the host of the UK version of Blockbusters, which had just wrapped up after a 10-year run. And for what ultimately turned out to be a pretty dull show, Bob does a great job here, as usual. Raise the Roof is essentially a gimmick quizzer where the contestants are playing for a massive prize, a new, fully furnished house situated in some exotic locale, worth somewhere around £100,000. Action Point had a rep at this time for producing many low-budget shows, so clearly they were trying to shed that image. Round 1 is called the Lucky 7. 6 contestants play. Bob asks a total of 7 true-false questions, each player secretly locking in their answer. with the questions were 50, 55, 60, 70, 85, and 100 pounds respectively, adding up to a potential total of 500 pounds. Correct answer wins the money, while the wrong answer costs the contestant all their accumulated winnings. A very harsh penalty, and kind of flawed, since really that renders the first 6 questions meaningless. The top 3 scorers move on to the second round. If there's a tie, then it goes to the tiebreaker, is the player who gave the most correct answers. If there's still a tie, however, we go to sudden death toss-up questions until there is a winner. The 3 losing contestants keep their winnings, plus receive a teapot made to look like a house or cottage, referred to as Bob's Bungalow. So Action Point doesn't totally erase their cheap rep with the lackluster consolation prize, which often get laughed at. So I don't know why they bothered. Round 2 is called Bid and Break. 3 contestants are staked with 500 pounds of new money. Bob announces a category, and each contestant in turn places a bet from 1 to 100 pounds, with the players taking turns being the first one to declare. A toss-up question is asked, and whoever buzzes in first and gets it right wins their bet. A wrong answer or getting beaten to the punch loses the bet. And if nobody answers correctly, then they all lose money. After 6 questions, the lowest scorer is eliminated, but keeps the cash, as well as the cash share in the previous round, and also that bloody bungalow. Round 3 is called the home run. The 2 contestants each go into individual isolation booths. They can hear Bob, but not each other or the audience. The players are each staked with 1,000 pounds of new money, and much like in the last round, Bob will give a category, and the contestants each place a bet, this time of up to 200 pounds. Unlike the last round, however, each contestant declares the bet in secret, and they each get the answer in turn to the same question. Contestants do not hear each other throughout this round and are kept completely in the dark as to how their opponent is doing. After 5 questions, whoever has the highest score is the winner and goes on to play for the house, while the losing player keeps their accumulated winnings, and yes, we couldn't deprive them of the bungalow. The final round is called the High Five. The contestant is shown a whole slew of categories and chooses their best 5. Each category contains 1 question, and the contestant can play them in any order they wish. A 60-second clock is set. Bob reads the question, and once he finishes, the clock starts. It stops when the contestant either answers or passes. If they pass, they can come back to it later. If the contestant gets 2 wrong answers or runs out of time, they've lost, and they instead receive a consolation prize. And no, not just the bungalow, but actually a pretty decent prize. But should they get all 4 correct answers out of the 5, then they win the house. So 60 seconds of thinking time to get 4 correct answers on categories that they picked for themselves. That makes for a generally pretty easy game. And by the way, I mentioned in that bonus game that there was a whole slew of different categories. Well, if you're curious about the complete list, here it is. Action films, ancient world, art, astronomy, athletics, the Beatles, books, boxing, capitals, chemistry, classical music, composers, countries, cricket, currency, dates, the earth, fashion, film directors, film musicals, food and drink, football, gardening, golf, history, horror films, horse racing, James Bond, languages, medicine, motor racing, movie stars, mythology, Olympics, Oscars, physics, pop, quotes, revolutions, Romans, royalty, rugby, sci-fi films, soaps, space travel, stage musicals, tennis, theater, TV comedy, TV movie, westerns, wildlife, World War II. I told me not to do that. Anyway, that was Raise the Roof, and it only lasted 17 episodes, went in and out with little fanfare, suffering from low ratings and poor reviews. At best, it did less than half of the viewership of its biggest competitor, BBC One medical drama Casualty, which incidentally is still running today since 1986. The ratings got so low, in fact, that at one point the show lost sponsorship with the Daily Express newspaper. Initially, there was a home viewer contest where viewers could also win a house by using game cards that they could pick up at the newsstand whenever they bought a copy of the Daily Express. But after they dropped their sponsorship, the contest was stopped, and as a result, the last few episodes had to be carefully edited to remove any references to that contest. That's just awkward. And the most common complaint I hear about the show is it was just too easy to win the big prize. The questions, for the most part, are not terribly hard. And that's a big problem when you're playing for a house. It's like most fans will tell you there's no point to hyping a massive grand prize that nobody's going to win. But if you do the reverse, make it too easy to win, it just makes it dull and boring. And there's no excitement knowing that pretty much everyone is going to win. So it's a very interesting accomplishment. You can't get excited about somebody winning a house. Luckily, 3 years later, when the Millionaire franchise launched in England and eventually took over the world, they figured out the right mix. A massive prize that was tough to win, but far from impossible, and filled with lots of suspense and excitement. As for Bob Holness, his next show would be a revival of the panel word game Call My Bluff, and he would make several guest spots in TV and acting roles. But unfortunately, by the early 2000s, his health went into decline. He suffered a stroke in 2002, and his appearances just became fewer and fewer after that. He did host a round of a mock version of Blockbusters during an episode of Ant Deck's Saturday Night Takeover, but you can tell he was just very frail and not in the greatest of health. But it was nice seeing him again. A year later, he'd be diagnosed with celiac disease and also began to suffer from vascular dementia and hearing loss. And he would spend his final days in a nursing home after several years under family care. Sadly, Bob passed away in his sleep on January 6th of 2012 at the age of 83. So our condolences to his family, even though it was so long ago. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Global Game. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you again next time. Cheerio.